What's the most embarrassing thing a family member has done? I like cucumbers. I put them in sandwiches and salads and use them instead of chips with dip. My husband hates them, so I keep them out of his food. One day while shopping in the produce section, he pulls a cuke out of the shopping cart and demands loudly, "What do you do with these? You buy them all the time but we never eat them." The looks we got were priceless. We are in our 60s. My younger brother coming downstairs Christmas morning with a wet patch on his pajamas and insisting he didn't wet his pants. He had a weird dream about marshmallow people who were cuddling him too hard. When my wife was a young teen, she asked her mom, my mother-in-law, to walk slightly behind her in the mall so as to not embarrass her, that is, to be seen with her mom. She complied. Except she did the Igor hunchback limp leg shuffle when my wife wasn't looking. Justified if you ask me. My dad does this anytime we go out to eat and the hostess says this way. My cousin, who was probably about 22 at the time, got so crap-faced at another one of our cousin's wedding that he got into an argument with the bartenders working the reception because they cut him off, then stormed off, but it was more of a drunk stumble, and he fell right into not only the table holding the wedding cake, but smack dab into the cake itself, destroying most of it. Then after being helped to the bathroom to clean himself up, he crapped his pants and then passed out while hiding out in a stall because he was too embarrassed to let anyone know he shat himself. He was found near the end of the reception passed out on the toilet, holding wads of crappy toilet paper because it looked like he was attempting to clean himself up, but then gave up and passed out. I always fear that if I am anywhere near the cake I am going to fall into it somehow, but he freaking did it. One of my great aunts was dying. At the hospital with her, my family was telling stories about her, including about how she helped many of them in times of need. My grandma, one of my great aunt's sisters, kept interjecting with comments about how my aunt never helped her. My mother accused my sister's 5-year-old of staring at her and giving her the evil eye. A shouting match ensued and my sister left crying 5 minutes later. They haven't spoken since. This was Thanksgiving Day, about 20 minutes into the meal. We couldn't even make it 30 minutes with each other. Needless to say, we probably won't be making that 4-hour drive for Thanksgiving anymore. That sounds like an early sign of dementia, unless she was always like this. Hopefully she gets examined by a doctor. Not the most embarrassing, but the most recent. My family went to Benihana for dinner, a Japanese hibachi place. The waiter asked us if we had any allergies and my dad blurts out, "I'm allergic to cats," because he is. But the waiter just kind of looked at him and with a flat expression said, "We don't serve cat here." Amazing that I thought it was just a random utterance at first, and then realized the allusion to Oriental food and cats. At her wedding reception, my tipsy dad took the mic and told a room full of friends and relatives that his daughter, the bride, was like the son he never had. His 2 sons in attendance, my brother and I, were pretty mortified. Okay, but see, you and your brother were the sins he did have. Your sister was the one he didn't have, so he was right. My dad died of congestive heart failure, but before he died he went through a period of sometimes doing strange things BC of lack of oxygen to his brain. One day, my younger brother, who was in high school at the time and had some behavior issues, got suspended and sent home from school. My dad went to pick him up, in his car, buck naked, giving no second thought to it. We took our grandma to a high-class restaurant for a steak dinner on Christmas Eve, because she's never experienced anything like it. Grew up very poor. When she got her steak it wasn't cooked fully to her liking, so she stabbed it with her fork and held it over the dinner candle, twirling it so it can cook longer. My mom asked my sophomore year girlfriend if she was a virgin the very first time she met her. Not funny whatsoever. I was on a cruise and I was walking with my mom, dad and buddy. Well, my mom saw these 2 model-esque bombshell blondies getting their cruise pictures done in the photo hallway, then proceeds to shove me into the middle of them and says, "Hey girls, this one's single. Why don't you say hello? His name is me." Not funny then, very funny now. This is just the beginning. My mom yells at retail workers. It's mortifying. In Tuscany, Italy with my family and friends for a milestone birthday, dining in a small family-owned restaurant. Finish dinner. time to leave, look for waitress to ask for bill. Sister beckons waitress over and asks for the bill in English. Waitress doesn't understand. Sister then says, in her best Italian accent, we'd like el biglio. My sister is not a young woman. Every dinner since that moment, when my sister is in attendance, requires someone to ask my sister to ask for el biglio. We always say that my grandfather speaks one Romance language. It has bits of Spanish, Italian, French, and the Latin he learned in school. He sounds absurd, but people actually usually understand him. My cousin pantsed his brother-in-law at a family event. Turns out Bill has major bowel problems and was trying to keep it private. So my cousin pantsed him and ran laughing into the other room. The Bill ended up having an uncontrollable bowel movement and couldn't get to the bathroom or pull up his pants fast enough. His sister never invited him to her family event again. That's so mean. I guess he didn't know, but poor dude who got pantsed. I was a little kiddo, but I remember my cousin saying, "Holy crap, my weenie just got really big for 1 minute in front of the whole family at Christmas." His first erection, shared with all his relatives. Nice. First of all, I love my dad, but sometimes I remember this and still remind him. Few weeks after 6th grade had started, my dad drove me to school. Unfortunately, he had a time bomb ticking in his bowel system and he had to fricking run to kids' restroom, and he absolutely fricking ruined it. The smell was in the hallways, as you might guess. Few kids saw it and I was known as the diarrhea kid. Yeah, 6th grade was rough. My sister-in-law believes mice and mouse are two separate animals, that rabbits hunt birds, that all geckos can, and will, crawl through your skin and throughout your body. Also that if you feed a dog raw meat that they'll become bloodlusted and murderous, despite my dog getting raw meat on the regular. Yeah, gotta watch out for those color bunnies. Do step-parents count? My dad ran a small wiring business until he died 3 years ago. After he died, my stepmom lit the building on fire to collect insurance money after she auctioned off what she could inside the night before. The police ruled it as arson, but because there was no actual proof she did it, she got away with it. Fast forward to early last year, she is engaged to some guy that she shot in the leg, had a police standoff at her house, then lit her own house on fire. My brother was riding the train to Bellingham from Tacoma, WA. When it stopped in Seattle, it had a little 15-minute break because it's a central station, so he assumed the same thing would happen in Bellingham. It only stops for about a minute to let people off. My mother was waiting at the station when the train pulled up and saw him through the window. Assuming he had 15 minutes, he decided to finish whatever stupid thing he was doing on the computer. My mother started waving frantically at him and he noticed but just rolled his eyes and signed just a minute. The train began moving out of the station with him still on it. Keep in mind this is the last stop before Canada. My brother didn't have a passport, and there was no train back until the next day. My mom is freaking out and runs up to the ticket counter to tell them her son was supposed to get off. The ticket lady proceeds to tell her there is absolutely nothing anyone can do. They can't just stop the train. Meanwhile, the ticket lady is communicating with the train operators. All of a sudden the ticket lady gasped. They let him off the train. My mom comes out of the station and sure enough, my brother is jogging down the tracks. My brother was 22 years old at the time. I haven't laughed so hard in a while. He jumped. My mother began stalking one of my best friends. I got a frantic call from him begging me to get her to leave him the frick alone. My GF's family thinks I'm Jewish because of a joke I made at Thanksgiving. And when her grandfather died, they did the Jewish prayer at the funeral just for me, and I was so goddamn embarrassed. My mother found out I had a solo in the winter play. I tried very hard to hide this from her. She sat 3 rows in, just close enough that the stage lights illuminated her, nodding out chin to chest because she was high as frick on H. No one in choir knew a thing about my parents and she quite literally stole the show. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me. My sister bought a house, and through a mixture of not wanting to mix business and family, and genuinely not being sure if he was still in the game, she didn't use our uncle as her realtor. 1. My aunt called my sister to tear her a new butthole over the phone about betrayal or some BS, and we haven't spoken to that side of the family since 2013. 2. My grandma was surprisingly quick to show everyone who her favorite kid was. No attempt at reconciliation. I think she lives for the chaos. I'm with your sister on the house one. There's certain things that you just don't involve family with, regardless of how good they are. Like buying houses, teaching you to drive, or gynecologist visits. Was out to dinner with my family. Dad started digging through mom's purse looking for a pen or something. Turn away for a minute. Hear mom bitching at him. Look back and he's got 2 tampons shoved up his nose. He then proceeded to order his food in this manner. No idea how the waitress kept a straight face. What a boss. My grandma uttered this phrase very confidently in front of my entire extended family. Look, my sister went to college and the only thing she knows how to do is toss salad. My grandma grabbed my breasts in the middle of the Denver airport and told me I was growing into such a nice young lady. 13-year-old me was horrified. She then told me that when you get old, they get soft and fall behind your brassiere, so I should always wear a long bra. She also announced at a huge family gathering, my cousin has become a woman. She'd gotten her first period, and who could forget, my father has a fungus. All of these things from a woman barely 5 feet tall with a strong Brooklyn Italian accent. I have a lot of wonderful hilarious stories about my grandma. I miss her terribly. Oh god. 13 was a terrible time in general. My grandma, whom I adored, walked up to me, lifted my arm and planted her nose in my armpit. She then declared to the house full of other family that I needed to start wearing deodorant. My dad kept us away from grandma when she drank. At a wedding I found out why. She got so hammered that she attempted to run and fell face first into a puddle of mud. She was wearing a pink dress that Queen Elizabeth herself would want to borrow. It's forever etched in my memory. At a very crowded beach, my obese aunt tried to save a pigeon. There was absolutely nothing wrong with it. It flew away when she bent down to grab it and she rolled down a hill and landed in a fire ant pile. She flopped around like a beach whale trying to get up while slapping at the ants biting her and screaming the whole time. I was about 16 and me and mom were in line to check out at a Walmart. The cashier is nice looking from what I remember, and for some reason I mention it to my mom. At this point there are like 2 people in front of us. As we are checking out and he's handing my mom the receipt, she blurts out, "My daughter thinks you're hot." No mom. Number. Going out in public with my father was often embarrassing. He would ogle girls as young as in high school, make cashiers cry when he didn't get his way, scream in my face when I embarrassed him. When I grew up I learned people would glare in our direction because he was being verbally abusive. It wasn't my fault at all, and overall is an unpleasant person to be around. We don't talk. I'm happy to see you realized none of that was your fault. I hope your life has much less stress in it now. One time, my whole family was at mass. All 6 of us all sitting together in a pew. In a church that holds about 500. My mom always insists upon sitting near the front, so we were about 8 rows from the altar. Just before communion, the priest announces there were some special awards to be given out. So, the lector walks to the altar and begins to call out some names for some community service awards or whatnot. My mom is relatively active in the church, so she whispers something to me along the lines of, "Oh, this must be for blah blah blah." Then she stands up and does that awkward shuffle across 10 people to the aisle and begins to wait patiently. The lady announces our school principal's name, some nun's name, and then she stops, shuts her book, and begins to walk off the altar, leaving my mom awkwardly standing in the aisle. My mom, realizing what is happening, tries to salvage the situation by sticking her finger up in the air as some sort of emotion to this lady, who isn't even looking at her, and then kind of loud whispers, "Oh, you don't need me, okay," as if she could hear her. Then, my mom looks back to us sitting in the pew. We have all sunk 4 or 5 inches down in our seats, and tries to whisper again, "No, I don't think they wanted me for this one." She does the awkward shuffle across the same tense strangers who watched all this go down, and stares at the gospel for the remaining 30 minutes of mass. Your poor mom must have felt so awkward, dang. My youngest cousin was 15 when my sister got married. She put him on a table with his parents so they could keep an eye on his drinking, because there was table wine plus an open bar. but obviously they didn't. I went to the bathroom before the speeches and found him lying face down outside the hall next to a large pool of wine red vomit. We remind him about it at every family gathering. He got married a couple of years ago and my sister threatened to return the favor. Almost got us thrown out of a hotel at like midnight when I was like 15. We all had dinner where mom got drunk. She decided to stay at the bar after dinner when we all went up and went to sleep. She comes back to the room like 4 hours later and starts bashing on the door and screaming to be let in because she never can keep track of keys when we travel. Worst part was that we had gotten that room because my dad knew somebody through work. My sister once argued with my parents and I that 24/7 meant having 24 hours and 7 minutes in a day. This same sister also couldn't tell time on clocks or analog watches until she was 17. She has a master's now and a great job. My dad. Being my dad throughout my life. When I was a kid he'd be cutting the grass and inevitably have to stop and go to Walmart for more grass cutting supplies, and I'd have to go with him. He'd be wearing these cut-off faded john shorts that had shriveled to Daisy Duke proportions with the remains of the pants existing as strings that looked like tassels, barely covering very white, very skinny chicken legs with grass clippings all over them. He'd bring his harmonica with him and play it while walking through the store, pointing at random ladies and exclaiming loudly, "Do not sex to this. Look at that fox." It didn't help that he looked exactly like Ned Flanders. Pretty much any time you went anywhere with him with strangers, he'd start random conversations with people and share way too many details about himself and whichever person was with him at the time. He once convinced me to bring him to a bar with some friends. I don't remember what happened, but I'm told he's famous now in my hometown and that he wasn't wearing any underwear that night. Thankfully I don't live there anymore. There's a convenience store close to my house that I go to a lot since it's convenient. And naturally I built a chit-chat rapport with the employees there. You know, talk about the weather, talk about how many hours they got this week, etc. Well, I realized my dad started going there when he's on this side of town because these people started referring to things in my life that apparently my dad tells them. Speaking of that convenience store, my dad, who is married and old as frick, apparently got this one employee's number and calls her all the time and tries to invite her to my house to fix me up with her. Your dad looks and sounds like the dad from Fairly Odd Parents and I absolutely refuse to be convinced otherwise. I should do a throwaway, but I'll just say a very close family member of mine was in charge of the slideshow and music at a big black and white ball that my cousin hosts every year. It's a big charity thing, and hundreds of people go. My family member uses his own equipment for these events. Well, he queued up the slideshow, but it wasn't their pictures. It was his pictures he had saved on his computer, on the big screen. One time my learning disabled stepbrother was pretending to be Thor in my great aunt's apartment. I remember hearing him start to mutter. He started getting louder, and then he shouts God of Storms and swings his arm in the air, knocking 3 antique porcelain figurines and a porcelain teapot off of a shelf. They shattered on the floor and my aunt starts crying and picking up the pieces saying these were my mother's. She got them from her mother, yet it turns out they were almost 200-year-old heirlooms. It's important to mention my whole family was in the kitchen and saw the whole thing. He was really scared and denied it was him. He was about 13 at the time. My mom, my siblings and I called her the Terminator. God help the young person at McDairy King that didn't make orders right. We would be treated to a performance of harassment, screaming, and finally the tears of the poor kid. Trivial crap, like forgetting to take tomato off. McDairy King. Dem big wop blizzards though. There's a Dutch tradition called Sinterklaas. You give each other presents and write poems for each other. My 15-year-old cousin read out loud big boobs instead of big fries. The words are similar in Dutch. He was red-faced for the rest of the evening. Groot eten equals big T. Groot frieten equals big fries. My parents are the people who yell at the waitress from across the restaurant and wave their hands up in the air if they need something. It's awful and I shrivel in my seat or yell at them anytime to ask me to join them. At my grandmother's funeral, a cousin of mine got up blubbering and admitted to stealing the last of her pain meds that would have gotten her through her last few days alive without suffering. He later died of hepatitis, which he had also given to his daughter when they shot up together. Thanks for making the funeral about you, you junky piece of crap. My dad stole my mom's pain meds when she was dying from cancer. She got dropped from 3 hospices because they knew what was going on. She didn't understand why it kept happening cause he kept lying about why they kept dropping her. At Christmas this year I was with my extended family alone because my close family was traveling. My aunt is Polish and made everyone do this Christmas Polish tradition where everyone goes around the table, youngest to oldest, and gives each other a kiss on the cheek. When my blood uncle, who is the Polish aunt's husband, came around the table, he stopped at me and said, rather loudly, "Now Savas name, I expect an open mouth kiss from you." Cue crickets. It still keeps me awake at night. We were at a Chinese buffet for a family celebration. Dad wanted clean plates. He got into a 5-minute argument with a Chinese man about the clean plates. "Excuse me, can we please have some clean plates?" I know. He doesn't speak English, this is gonna be hard. Plates. Clean plates. 4. New. Food. Fresh plate. I'm like you. You are not mate. Now where are the clean plates? It turns out the guy who he was asking for plates was also a customer and didn't actually work there. He just saw Asian man and assumed he was staff. I am English. Went on holiday to Florida with my family in the summer. On the 4th of July we visited a town called Celebration. Called such because it was founded on Independence Day. Everyone is in American t-shirts. Clothing. Decorations are everywhere. People are having a ball. We go into a shop just off from the street selling USA merch and my dad announces to the store the British are coming. That's actually hilarious. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.